representing the Masters of Public Policy program, Brian Kennedy.
There are two things that I want to do before we start. In one, y'all going to make fun of me, but I want to take a selfie with the class of 2016. Second is a bit more serious because it would be a great injustice if I did not take this time, being from North Carolina, to give a message to our state legislators that House Bill 2, the bathroom bill, needs to be repealed. Around 1850, my great-great aunt was sold in exchange for a square grand piano. Her mother, Amy Pulham, would undoubtedly search for her daughter for the rest of her life. Unfortunately, the family would never again be reunited. In April of 1960, my grandmother sat behind bars in a Nashville, Tennessee jail. She had been arrested along with students from Fisk University and Tennessee State for sitting at a white-only's lunch counter at the downtown Walgreens. After her release from jail, she returned to school. The lunch counters were still segregated. And I would like to ask my grandmother, my mom, to stand up, please. In 1963, my grandfather had just graduated from North Carolina Central University with a degree in accounting and had just left as a veteran in the Korean War. He moved to Washington, D.C. and took the only job he could find, that was an orderly at a hospital. He had been interviewing at banks for positions there, but had repeatedly been told that while he was qualified, they could not hire a black accountant. In January 1972, my father, 7 years old in the middle of his second grade year, was bused across PG County, Maryland to the all-white elementary school. His mother had to ride the school bus with him every day for the first 2 weeks as they passed signs with threats and warnings. Every day he had to fight as he was touched, harassed, and teased and called names. In 2012, in my last year at North Carolina Central University, I rode around Durham with my best friend in his Nissan Exterior, stealing pro-Amendment 1 signs at a protest of the potential state ban on marriage. I watched as Brandon mobilized the entire campus to vote against the amendment, and I also watched his face on election night as we lost and discrimination was voted into the state constitution. My great aunt's journey was different than my grandmother's. My grandmother's journey was different than my grandfather's. My grandfather's different than my father's, and his different from my friends. And they should be. The struggle is not a stationary or monolithic act. Instead, it's evolutionary, it's metamorphic, and it's always moving forward. And although the struggle that we learned about yesterday may look nothing like the struggle that we will embark on tomorrow, it is important that we hold on to one single common thread. And that is, against all odds, justice must prevail. These stories are important. The history that they represent is something that we like to call the path or the road to justice. We use this history to inform our work, to motivate us, to develop our vision, but we need to be careful. Oftentimes, we look back at the struggle and take an historical revisionist perspective. We tend to view these events and these stories as the climax before an inevitable denouement. In practice, however, social justice work never follows that rosy narrative that history tells us. The reality is that the road to justice is ugly, and it's paved with the tears and pains of many defeats. is paid by the bloody backs of enslaved Africans, by the demands of brave women who refused second-class citizens but would never see enfranchisement for themselves, by bodies battered by lynch mobs on the way to the ballot box, by parents who have seen their black children killed by state-sponsored bullets spewed by those who were sworn to protect. It is very important that we understand that while the path to victory may not be linear and may not be clear, we must believe that against all odds, justice must prevail. In 2012, our attempt at stopping a ban on marriage failed. And yet, on October 14, 2014, the first same-sex couple was legally married in the state of North Carolina. Because against all odds, justice must prevail. My father, 7 years old, continued to be called names and harassed. And yet he paved the way for thousands of little black children who will walk through those very same doors and did not have to endure the same harassment that he did. Because against all odds, justice must prevail. My grandfather's first job at an actual bank would be as an overqualified bank teller. And yet he leveraged that opportunity into a career and sent 5 children to college because against all odds, justice must prevail. It would be 4 years after my grandmother was arrested before lunch counters in the South would be integrated. And yet, because of our sacrifice, none of us have had to endure the same type of overt discrimination that she has because justice must prevail against all odds. My great-great-aunt was never reunited with her family. In fact, they would never find the location of the plantation which she was sold to. And yet, more than 150 years later, that very same piano sits in my family living room in Durham, North Carolina as a reminder that against all odds, justice must prevail. As we walked across the stage today, and that hood was placed on our shoulders and the diploma was placed in our hands, so too was a privilege and a responsibility. It is our duty to battle ignorance, to strike down inequities, and to slay hatred wherever it may hide. The people in this room have the capacity and the capability to make this world a safer place for our children, our grandkids, our nephews, our nieces, and it is imperative that we take that responsibility seriously. The pursuit of justice is not a choice. The pursuit of justice is not convenient. The pursuit of justice is not optional. Justice is a mandate, and it is a promise. So when you leave this place and your work gets hard because it will, and when your faith wavers because it will, and when you feel disparaged because you will, and when the enemy tries to stop you because it will, you must stand tall, you must look injustice in the eye, and you must believe that against each and every odd, justice must prevail. Thank you.
What a day. Now representing the Masters in Coexistence program, Zinwa Nagy.